This computer. And here we go, I guess, for another week. And it looks like there might be a couple new people who haven't been here before. Maybe I just don't have the memory that to recall that they have. So if there's anybody who's new to the classes, we're kind of curious about how you found out about them and what you might hope to gain from attending. Try not to be too shy. You can just unmute your microphone and say hello if you care to. Maybe everybody's been here before and I just missed them.
You guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is that Joe?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. My husband and I quit smoking in January, and I have known about the whole food plant-based way of living for, well, since about 2009. I have 3 bookshelves full of books and recipes, and I've seen the documentaries and followed Dr. McDougall, Greger, Furman, Colin Campbell, Esselstyn, Chef AJ, and many more. Watched the Food Revolution, all kinds of movies, and still can't seem to do it by myself. My husband is not really interested, so I thought I need to join a group. Here I am.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you, and that's why we have these classes every single week. Scott and I. Maybe Scott will say a couple words.
Yeah, and I can show you I don't know if you're familiar with our class website or checked any of that stuff out yet, or if you're just coming in cold. How did you find out about the class?
Oh, I researched, because I decided I can't do it by myself. And I'm in my 70th year and I have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high anxiety, and I'm pre-diabetic. And, I need to do something here. Tick, tick, right? Yeah, I did check out the website and I watched a few of the recordings.
Oh, great.
Great.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely have the information. Now it's just trying to implement it and how to make it work with your husband. I know my wife wasn't interested the first 3 years, so I kind of did it on my own, and then finally I got her to watch Forks Over Knives, and she eventually came around. But yeah, it can be challenging. We have the Facebook group, we have community events. So kind of stick with the classes, stick with Eugene Plant-Based Providers, that website also with the upcoming events, so that maybe we can create our own. We're trying to create our own community here, and you can be part of that. And hopefully, with other people in this class can give advice on how they've dealt with similar challenges, and hopefully we can help each other out.
My husband's not going to do it.
Okay.
I am on my own here, and my friends. I have some friends who are chefs, and they're not interested. It's okay though. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else care to contribute anything? Or if you're new to the class, just unmute and say hello. Just kind of curious to find out how you found out about the classes and what you might hope to gain.
Hello, I'm Shirley, and
Hello,
I just
Shirley.
want to give Joe some support because I smoked as a rebellion, who knows what, but in the early 70s for 2 years, and quitting was the hardest thing I think I've ever done. If you can quit smoking, you can do this.
Yeah, thanks for that encouragement. It's great.
Anyone else? We kind of like to have people be able to share what they like, and then of course we're willing to take any questions that you might have.
Dolly here.
Hello, Dolly.
Hello. Well, I would like to offer some hope for everyone. Hank and I have been on this program for, 16 months now, I think. And first it was transition, and then it was full bore into whole food, plant food base, plant food base. And we just keep getting better. We both had high blood pressure. I have type 2 diabetes. Hank had pre-diabetes and high cholesterol, the whole works. And as of yesterday, when we went to the doctor, instead of taking 4 metformin, I'm down to 1 just because of this diet. And we're totally off of our blood pressure meds. And our cholesterol is both normal now, and I have to work on the triglyceride part of it. We're both just really doing well. And I'm in a wheelchair all the time, so I don't tend to lose as much weight very fast. It goes off a pound or 2 at a time. But my husband's down to the weight he was in high school, and it just can be done, and it's a lot of fun. And every time you turn around, they take a pill away, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank-
I just dropped out of pre-diabetes. Now I'm normal. We both have a low HDL. Dr. Barang didn't seem to be too concerned about it. Perhaps we could benefit from some healthy oils, but she said, be careful about that.
Well, good. She said, be careful about that. Remember, HDL are like garbage trucks. If you have a lot of bad cholesterol, LDL, you'll need a lot of HDL to kind of clean up. But if your LDL is down there, your HDL doesn't have to be that high. So, and it's again, only one factor in your overall cardiac risk. Eating whole food, plant-based is causes less inflammation, and also it's actually anti-inflammatory, and you don't produce the trimethylamine and oxide, which is again another inflammatory chemical that pushes bad cholesterol into your arteries. So there are many reasons to continue to do this.
Thank you.
Welcome. Diane.
Hi, I just wanted to offer some support to the people that shared about recently quitting smoking. And I've been off it for 16 months. And usually the old part was, it would be 6 months and then I'd relapse. But yeah, it's a really hard thing to do. And I feel so much better now that now I can breathe easier. And I'm really feeling better since David told me about this class and we started, it was like a transitioning period. And probably for the past 3 weeks, I'd say we've been getting an A. I mean, it's like we've been eating very well, and I feel like my energy level is better. And I'm just feeling better. My mood is better. Anyway, thank you. Stick around. I think it's really worth it. I've got high blood pressure, but I mean, that could change too. I mean, I took a blood pressure vacation, a medication vacation, but the blood pressure crept back up. So we'll see what happens with that as I continue on this journey. So thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. As you continue on the journey, your arteries will get healthier and healthier, likely, and you'll likely be able to reduce more and more medicine as time goes on.
Thank you.
Well, so far, so good. Any other comments? Is there anybody in the class who can't afford these sessions? You know that we don't charge anything for any of these sessions. So I tried to make a little minor joke there.
Can't afford to miss them.
Yeah, that was for Eureka's sake, in case he or she had an issue. Joan.
I don't think of this as a diet. Some people say, oh, you're on a diet, but the big difference is the education. And it's the education piece that keeps me going. To understand and know whatever it is, what ingredient is doing what, or I just finished the salt, sugar, fat book, and to see how manipulated you are. And I'm reading the How Not to Die book, and just being educated makes me want to make these choices. And I'm down 22 pounds
Oh, congrats.
since the
Congrats.
first of the year when I started.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I have a
Yeah, we don't really like to use the word diet. I don't like to use the word diet. I started this over 11 years ago, and this is just what I eat now because I'm choosing foods that are healthy for my health. I don't like to put poison, and I just won't put any poison foods in my body anymore. Not doing it. But I don't look at it as a diet. Who else?
Joe has a question.
Joe.
Here.
I'm just curious, are you guys, the majority of you, do you try to not eat oil, sugar, and salt? Yeah, good.
Yeah, not only try, we actually do it.
Yeah, I
I've
would
been
love-
doing it. It was difficult when we went to Italy. Everything is swimming in oil there, but other than travel, it's hard to eat out. So you have to find restaurants that will cater to what you would like them to cater to, and you just learn to speak up and say, "Look, do you have something that's made without the ingredients that are not healthy for you?" And you get more comfortable as you practice that. Sir Shirley. I see your hand was up for something else. Okay, Tom.
No, I had a comment.
Oh, okay, Shirley.
I
Then
just
Tom
didn't
next.
unmute. As the longer my friends and family are aware of my eating habits now, they will have a potluck or a dinner and they'll say, and Shirley will bring whatever she wants. And at first, nobody touched my dishes. And now I'm bringing home empty dishes. So I think what was most helpful to me was when I went to a potluck at the church and I saw all of that yummy, delicious food, because I was really kind of constrained to a lot of soups and my green salad. And I went to that potluck and the whole world opened up. And so I think I'm learning to use spices a lot more than I ever have in my 74 years. Now I'm spending a lot of time in the spice aisle because it can change the whole flavor of a dish. But now I'm thinking I need a cooking class. I've got the cookbooks and online is good, and anything I want to eat, if I want lasagna, I just say plant-based lasagna and it pops right up. But that potluck was really eye-opening for me as far as helping me move along. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Did you see that there is a free cooking class I have a link to on the website through Switch? It's SWICH, I think is how it's spelled. And it's an free online plant-based cooking class.
I did not see that. I do a lot of solo RV camping and this weather has made it challenging, but
Oh, yeah.
I haven't had internet, so I was lucky tonight to get here.
Oh, okay.
So, I hate to start a class that I'm kind of committed to, and I don't know if it's a drop-in class but I'll check it out. Thank you.
I'm showing it on the screen right now. So if you go to the homepage of the website and click on the resources tab, so this is just livelifestylemedicine.com, go to the resources tab and then scroll down here and there's free plant-based cooking class. So click on that and it's right here, switch, get started now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of information there. And that's
Thank
a
you.
free one. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, Tom,
I have a
and then
question.
Kyra. Go ahead, Tom.
I have a question about blood thinners and a plant-based diet. That have a friend who just had eye surgery, and in conjunction, it was cataract surgery. In conjunction with that, she had a goniotomy. I don't know if you know what that is, but they cut some part of the eye to drain the glaucomic pressure off. And she's had a tremendous problem with bleeding so that her iris changed colors. And the doctor, I didn't bring up plant-based diet because I didn't want to confuse the issue. It was already tense enough with just going in for cataract and goniotomy surgery. But what's the thinking on a combination of blood thinners and the plant-based diet? Does it make it so you don't need blood thinners like somebody on the standard American diet does? And what does the average doctor think about the need for blood thinners? I know this is, I'm having a hard time expressing myself because it's anyway, that's it.
Well, there's a number of reasons why people could be put on blood thinners. One of the main reasons is atrial fibrillation, an irregularity to the heart where the top two chambers don't actually beat normally. They just sit there and quiver, and blood clots can form. And so people are put on different medications to thin their blood for that. That's one of the more common reasons. There are other reasons. People have blood clots in their legs, or they have blood clots to their lung because they have unusual clotting factors. And so they get put on anticoagulant medications. And there's kind of, in my mind, a couple different types. One is Coumadin or warfarin, which is a type which is influenced by the vitamin K and many of the dark green leafy vegetables that you may be exposed to. And the other are anticoagulants that food doesn't really interfere with. So depending on the anticoagulant that she's taking, food may not have much of an issue as far as interaction with medicine. If she's on Coumadin or warfarin, then what eating more dark green leafies does, or vitamin K, it'll clot your blood more readily, and that's something you don't necessarily want to do. So you have to slightly increase the Coumadin or warfarin dose as you increase the greens in your life, but then you get used to that amount. And the benefits of having more greens and fiber and nutrients probably outweigh the, people have been told for years, avoid eating greens if you're taking warfarin or Coumadin. That's really old way of thinking. The new way of thinking is eat the greens, but don't eat a whole bunch of greens one week and then just stop eating them for a week, because your blood will get potentially a little too thin. So you just need to be careful to eat the same amount. Now, whether greens, whether this diet or way of eating whole food plant-based, I don't know, Scott, if you've seen Gregor, I've heard him talk about there may be some like aspirin effects, which kind of keep a little, the blood a little thinner. And maybe stroke preventive or heart attack preventive on that basis, but I think it's a mild effect. What's your take, Scott?
Yeah, a mild effect. And then also a lot of the guidelines, even with the American College of Cardiology. And if you look at the taking aspirin as primary prevention to prevent heart attacks and strokes, pretty much everybody but United States has lifted that, except even the United States has lifted it as far as primary prevention for heart attack, but there is still some maybe minor benefit of taking a daily aspirin to prevent stroke, but pretty much everywhere else in the world, all the European countries, they're all going away from aspirin for primary prevention for heart attack and stroke. But sometimes people have had, have a artificial heart valve or something like that. Certain cardiologists still recommend a baby aspirin, and that's just a conversation you have with your doctor about that. But I would say what Charlie said is that if you're on a whole food plant-based diet as compared to the standard American diet, you're already kind of getting that little bit of blood thinning effect like an aspirin would give you in general. So your risk of having a heart attack, a stroke, a blood clot, all those things is going to be so much less, especially if you don't smoke, than someone that's on a standard American diet. I don't know if that, I'll let whoever asked that question.
And you don't have the risk of bleeding from taking the aspirin.
Yeah, that's it. That was really my question, is taking a blood or an anticoagulant like Eliquis in conjunction with the standard, with the plant-based diet, make your blood too thin, that then you're at risk of bleeding like this. I don't know if you can see that.
I see something, but is that your arm?
That's my arm with a big bruise on it that I don't even know where I got, because I'm taking Pradaxa and I'm doing the plant-based diet religiously.
Yeah.
I'm thinking my blood is too thin, that it would be better if I didn't take the anticoagulant and just stuck to the standard the plant-based diet. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, I haven't seen a study that demonstrates the effectiveness of a plant-based diet versus Eliquis. What are you taking the Eliquis for? Is it for
It's Pradaxa. I had one episode of AFib.
Yeah, so that's a discussion. If you've only had one episode, are you in AFib right now?
No, I've only had one episode over many years, like 10 years.
Well, this would be, if it were me, I'd be knocking on the cardiologist's door and saying, hey,
you can't talk to them. You cannot talk to them. They don't listen. Period. End of sentence. They don't listen.
I guess if they have devices which can monitor, I think smartwatches can monitor whether you develop atrial fibrillation. And if you had a device like that could monitor yourself, you could kind of, if you found yourself to be in sinus rhythm all the time and never having any episodes of that, you might have a good argument for saying, hey, with one-time episode like that, I don't know, and I'm having bruises on my arms. If that's not vitamin C that's causing that, some people are a little low on C, but I doubt that you are, because you're eating probably a fair amount of fruit and vegetables that have vitamin C in them. Yeah, I think you have a legitimate question as to whether you should continue to take that, but that would be for you and your doctor to ultimately make a decision. And remember,
doctors aren't rational, and if they didn't learn it in medical school, it doesn't exist. So there is no conversation. They just shut you down.
Yeah, I would just say, like what Charlie was referring to before, if your cardiologist wants you on Eliquis because you've been in and out of atrial fibrillation, I would stick with taking it, because we don't have any studies that show that a plant-based diet would give you the same protection for a blood clot that the Eliquis would. So we can't say, because there's no studies, but I have not ever seen any patients on a plant-based diet or studies of anyone on a plant-based diet that has bruising because of blood thinning, but definitely from the anticoagulants like the Eliquis.
Right.
So I don't think the bruising has anything to do with your diet. I think it has to do with the Eliquis, the
So,
Pradaxa.
so my recommendation to you, Tom, is this. Call your doctor and tell them, your family doctor, if it's not the cardiologist, and say, look, I had one episode, I'm having this bruising, the side effects, and I really want to be reevaluated to make a decision as to whether I can go off of that or not.
Yeah, I could try it again.
Try it again. It's
Okay.
been long enough. And you can also ask them about, can I get something to monitor myself to make sure I'm not going in and out of this? And
Oh, I know when I have it, it's like a freight train. It's like a jalopy in my chest. I know when I have it.
well,
And
you've had it
And
more
I
than
wore
one.
I wore a Holter monitor for a month and didn't have any AFib.
Huh, well,
Anyway,
Uh,
I'm taking up too much time. I just,
that's all right. It's an interesting discussion and someone else may be involved with it sometime. But
Okay.
thanks for asking.
thanks.
Okay, Kyra.
I have to replace, I just threw out a big frying pan because it was way too old and it was an older nonstick. So I'm looking for recommendations for either a wok or a bigger frying pan to make stir fries minus the oil. And what people are liking and using.
Any thoughts from anybody? Susan? You can unmute.
Thank you. I got it. Yeah, I was using one of the newer nonstick pans, that it's not a Teflon. Supposedly, from what I know, it's supposed to be a lot safer than the old kind. But recently, the doctor gave me some blood tests, and turned out I'm a little tiny bit anemic. And so I hauled out my old cast iron frying pan that I hadn't been using because it's a little bit not completely flat. It's a little bent at the bottom. It's an old one. But so I'm using that now and I like it a lot. And I think it should raise my iron. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. So sometimes cast iron is kind of heavy for some people. And so, depending on your bone and muscle structure and how easy it is to wield heavy pots, it could work. I have heard of using iron pots to get a little bit more iron in your body, but if you're eating a variety of healthy whole plant foods, you're likely going to get an adequate amount of iron unless you're losing it from somewhere. Any other recommendations for pots? Or someone says they use an Instapot for almost everything. Cooking, and you could.
Someone else is using a scan pan made in Denmark, expensive, but it's the first nonstick we ever had because we were worried about the chemicals involved with nonstick pans, but we really like it.
At least that's a start. If people think of it as we go, just put it in the chat and I'll watch it because
Okay.
if I'm gonna make the investment, I want something that'll really work. And I thought about cast iron, but I need a bigger pan and that might be a really big pan. So I don't know if I want a 20-pound pan for sauteing.
I use a Cuisinart pan and stainless steel, and stuff sticks to it. But if you leave it in there a little while, it kind of loosens up, and then you don't have any trouble with it.
All right,
So
thank you, everybody.
Okay, Dolly, and then Bobby.
Yeah, Hank here. I went in
Hank.
for I went in for glaucoma surgery last December, and they noticed I had AFib, and it looked like chronic AFib, constant AFib, although it was asymptomatic. So they put me on Eliquis. Dr. Gundry over at Riverbend is very on board with the whole food plant-based diet. He says it would be just perfect to go ahead and use Eliquis along with a plant-based diet. I noticed very little distress or symptoms from bleeding or bruising. About the only thing I've ever noticed is a little bit of a tendency to bleed, nosebleed when I blow my nose real hard. But other than that, I feel great. Done a great job in keeping my blood thin and under control. So I have the chronic AFib all the time, but Dr. Gundry did an excellent job in diagnosing it and treating it. And he used Eliquis and said that was just dandy with the plant-based diet.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard of Gundry's name before. Scott, had you?
Yeah, actually, I heard through the grapevine, I think with Misty Carlson, I think she mentioned him too at some point at Eugene Plant-Based Provider Meeting.
We need to talk to him sometime. All right. Thanks, Hank, for sharing that. How about Bobby?
Hi, yeah, I have a question. Several months ago, I bought a smartwatch. And a month or so after I got it, I had an episode of arrhythmia, like a kind of a prolonged episode of skip beats. I've had skip beats every once in a while for a long time, and I never thought anything of it. But time, because I had the smartwatch, I decided to test for it and see what it said. And it said that I was having AFib. So when I went to my doctor's office, they did an EKG. There was no AFib at the time, but there were a couple of things that were kind of concerning on the EKG. It was showing some incomplete right bundle branch block and suggestive of a past heart attack. And a possible enlargement of one chamber of the heart. I can't remember which one. So they did a 48-hour Holter monitor, which was essentially normal, and an echocardiogram, which also was essentially normal, which was reassuring. And that was the note that my doctor put on the result was, contact the patient, these results are reassuring, and pretty much let it go at that. But when I read the report, there was one thing that I wasn't reassured by, I was concerned by it, and that was that the aortic valve was sclerotic, which isn't that, I guess it's like a very early stage of things. It's not stenosis yet, but in looking up information about it, it said it's a marker of our atherosclerosis and heart disease. So that was not real reassuring to me. And so my question is this, first, is this something that I should be concerned about? And is there a dietary approach that would reverse that, or at least halt it from progressing any further?
Well, it might be helpful for you to know that I have a bit of a valve malfunction in my mitral valve, and my echocardiogram was normal, and I ignore it at this point. Just going to monitor it, but the best thing that I can do for my heart is to stick with foods that are not going to poison me, and that's whole plant foods as they're grown in nature. So I've been doing that now for 11 years. I feel very comfortable. I'm doing everything I can. There are no other medicines that I think are going to, stop progression. I have no clue why it started, just like you probably don't have a clue, other than you have concern, and I'd like to have you allay those concerns. choose foods that are going to be anti-inflammatory, that are going to be helpful for your, to prevent heart disease. And that's probably the best thing that you can do. You exercise regularly, work on making sure that you reduce the stresses in your life, either through meditation, yoga, listening to music, getting out in nature, whatever it takes. Love more, hate less. Avoid chemicals like smoking and alcohol and those things. And if you're doing those in your lifestyle, I would say live your life and not worry.
Okay,
That's my
Thank-
thought.
thanks. That helps.
Who else? Yeah, so Scott, you may want to take this. Joe is asking, what did it take for you to become whole food plant-based?
Well, for me, it was for my health is what I did it for. And actually I would say I was probably after a year, so this has been 10 years ago, after a year of being probably 95% whole food plant-based, I had achieved my own health goals that I'd set out for. So I'd reversed my pre-diabetes, I had lost some weight, I got rid of my irritable bowel syndrome and my heartburn, and my cholesterol dropped 100 points, and I felt amazing. And I was doing that still not 100% plant-based. I was still occasionally getting, some processed foods, a burger now and again, still eating some pastries, things like that. And so, because when I studied the nutrition, I never set out to necessarily become be vegan or anything like that. It wasn't my part of my health goals or just my goals in general. But somewhere between, I'd achieved all my goals after about a year, but somewhere between year 1 and year 2, I kind of slowly over that period of time kind of was losing my taste for those foods. Like I'd still eat some of those foods I mentioned and I wouldn't feel very good after. So then I just kind of slowly got rid of them over time. I was mentioning earlier with my wife not being on board, it was a little more challenging because I was having to cook for myself, and I wasn't a very good cook. I'm still not a super good cook or a food expert in any way. Just nutrition is my expertise, but yeah, it was just kind of a slow process. And so it's just gonna, like Charlie did it real sudden and jumped into the deep end because he had a different motivation than I had. So, but one thing I wanted to add for Joe, I think maybe some other people can chime in because some of her concerns with her husband, even if he's never going to do it. One way it works for my family, my extended family, because we often get together on Sundays and we do extended family gatherings and meals and stuff. And so we have people that are eating plant-based, but we have more that don't eat plant-based. And so we kind of do a theme every week. So we'll do like a salad bar, a potato bar, a burrito bar, a pasta bar. So we kind of have a theme, and then everyone there's like ingredients. And so, you dirty up a few more dishes, but it's kind of like a potluck style. And so instead of having to cook a dish that has meat or dairy or processed foods in it, you actually have ingredients. And so I can grab, if it's a potato bar night, there's Yukon Golds, there's red potatoes, there's sweet potatoes, and everyone grabs potatoes and they have it on my plate. And then I dump on beans and sauteed onions and peppers, and there's a tofu sour cream and a red sauce and all different kinds of toppings that I can put on it. But then people that are not eating plant-based, they, maybe somebody browned some hamburger and there's some cheese and there's regular sour cream. And so everyone can kind of eat the same food, but we just have kind of different toppings. And you can do that with lots of different themes, but pasta, like I said, pasta or salad or burritos or whatever. And it's really easy because then we're all still enjoying food together, eating the same meal, but people that are not plant-based can put their toppings on theirs. And so it might be something that even works for someone that's just trying to do that with their spouse that's not on board, but you guys are still kind of eating the same food, but maybe there's a few different toppings that your husband puts on that you don't. So just an idea, and other people can chime in. They have other ideas.
Susan?
forgot. Oh, yeah, I have two questions, but I think I'm gonna only ask one. And that is, another thing that was found in my blood test was, that my cholesterol is a little high, and I was shocked. And so I was just wondering, from what you know, what do you think could have caused it? I mean, I do eat, I'd say, a pretty good amount of peanut butter and also dark chocolate. So are those things, I mean, I was under the impression that my cholesterol couldn't go high unless I ate animal products, which I don't. So I guess I'm a little weak on my knowledge about this. Can you help me?
Scott, you wanna?
Yeah,
Take
sure,
that.
sure. Yeah, so I mean, everyone has a different set point when it comes to cholesterol. So I don't know if it went up when you were on the diet. That would surprise me. But I have many patients that were. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, I've been vegan for quite a few years, but actually, so my diet is better. I'm eating a lot less, fewer processed foods, but there's still a little bit of processed foods that I, eat.
Yeah. So yeah, processed foods will have oil, and oil is going to have a little bit of saturated fat, so it's could raise your cholesterol. And then coconut and nuts and seeds
yeah.
will have some saturated fat in them too. A small, not a super high amount, but that could be problematic. But the thing that I wanted to mention is, because for everybody else's benefit too, is that I've had many patients that were in the 300s on their cholesterol, which is really, really high. And then they went 100% whole food plant-based, and they're still in the 200s. I mean, they dropped it 100 points or so, but that's sometimes as far as you can go, because everybody has a different amount of cholesterol stored in their liver. Everybody has genetically, everybody has a different amount of an enzyme in their liver that breaks down cholesterol. And some people have more of the enzyme, some people have less of the enzyme. So it's pretty complicated, but in essence, cholesterol is just one component. That's just one risk factor for heart disease and stroke. And so I try to get patients not to focus too much on their number unless they've already had a heart attack or they're really super high risk. But otherwise, I would just say, as long as you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, not smoking, you're getting exercise, you're getting good sleep, stress reduction, all those things, those are much larger factors to reduce your risk for heart attack and stroke than just what your cholesterol number is. Because there's people that die every day with great cholesterol numbers on statins, but they eat the standard American diet and they smoke and don't exercise, and they drop dead every day from heart disease, with numbers that are much lower than many of the patients I have that have the healthy lifestyle and are on the plant-based diet. And even though they have higher numbers, they're not having the heart attack or the stroke, because again, the cholesterol is just one risk factor.
Yeah.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. My wife and I, we jumped into this 100% together. And in 1 month, my cholesterol went from 240 to 148. And then over the next few months, it went down to 135. Hers went from 212 down to about 140, in the 140s. And she was doing well at that. And after several months, she started adding back in nuts and a little more oils. And sure enough, her cholesterol went back close to 200 again, even though she was totally plant-based, no animal products whatsoever. It was the nuts, the seeds, the nut butter, the peanut butter, the oils in the diet that somehow got converted to more cholesterol.
Yeah.
She stopped it, and then her cholesterol went back down again.
So she stopped eating nuts?
Yeah, so she went down to a quarter cup of nuts a day, like Dr. Greger recommends.
A nut. Oh, does he recommend just a quarter of a nuts?
A quarter cup, yeah, a quarter cup of nuts a day, and he recommends walnuts as being the ones with the most omega-3. He also recommends a tablespoon of flax seeds. So if you're doing a tablespoon of flaxseed with a quarter cup of nuts, you're probably good.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if you're eating a lot more, if
Yeah.
you tried that and you repeated your cholesterol after a couple months, you might find that you are back down in a range that you were happier with.
Well, 135, and she wanted me to put me on statins. And I says, no, I don't want that.
The 135 was a LDL cholesterol,
Oh,
not
Oh.
total cholesterol.
well, she
Are you talking
said
about
that
Christine or
good-
talking about you?
I think she's talking about Susan. You're talking
I-
about yourself.
yeah, I was, she said, yeah, 135, and she said normal was 130, I thought. But
Yeah,
she
that's
said
LDL.
good cholesterol is good, but my other cholesterol is the HDL or something.
Yeah,
The
and you haven't had a heart attack or stroke?
No.
Then to
No,
prevent one a heart attack over 5 years, you have to treat 104 people for one person to get benefit. And 2 or 3 of those people probably have side effects from the medicine. So calculate it and see if that's something that you feel comfortable with. Is that something you want to do? Do you think you're the one person out of 104 people who would benefit and prevent a heart attack or stroke
Who would
That's-
benefit from
from taking the
that?
cholesterol lowering medicine?
No, I don't feel like I want to do that.
As being like there's a less about a 1% chance that you may benefit from taking that medicine if you haven't
Oh,
had a previous heart attack or stroke. That's generally not discussed by most doctors who are prescribing that medicine.
definitely not. Wow. But what about red yeast? Does that sometimes?
Yeah, red yeast has the statin-like chemical in it, and you could eat some of that, but again, I don't know
Not-
if you want to eat too much of it, but you could eat some of it. If you're doing whole foods that are plant-based, you're
Yeah.
really giving yourself your best chance. Avoid the excess oils and fats in your diets, and
Yeah. Okay.
be careful about any foods that say vegan, and they've stripped out the fiber and they're
Oh,
not
yeah.
natural. Vegan baked meats, vegan cheeses,
Right.
vegan, just because it says vegan does not mean it's a health food. You can be a junk food vegan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And do you have an air fryer where you don't have to use oil to cook with?
No, that would be good. We do saute in water though, and
Good. That's
but we
great.
have been using coconut milk in stir fries, so that's probably not good.
That has saturated fat in it, that coconut milk.
Yeah.
You don't really want that.
Right.
I know it
Tastes
tastes good. I know it tastes good, but
I
so
could
did other
substitute-
foods.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
want your health. I don't think anything tastes better than having your own health.
Right. Absolutely.
Just a thought. Okay,
Yeah. Thanks.
thank you. Diane,
Hi, I stopped my statin earlier this year after being on it for over 40 years. And for a couple of reasons. Well, obviously, I think that I have a lot of faith in the plant-based whole foods that I'm eating to help lower it. I'll check later to see if it's working, but I think it's done its job. I'm not going to live. I'm 70 now, so its benefit going forward is probably little to none. So that's another reason I think it's a good reason to get off it. But that's not my only risk factor I've got going on. I have a family history of colon cancer. My dad had a couple of cases. I've been screened a couple of times by colonoscopies, and they'll come back negative, but it still worries me. And one of the reasons I latched on to these foods is the benefit fiber has in reducing my risk.
yeah, so for every 10 grams of fiber you add to your diet, you're going to reduce your colon cancer risk by about 10%. So my fiber went from maybe 15 to 20 grams a day, which is the standard American fare, about 15. And it's now up to 60 to 80 grams. So I've reduced my colon cancer risk by 50, 70%. So you might consider doing the same thing. I do that by following Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen.
Okay.
It's a free app on the iPhone. Do you have that?
I do not.
Yeah, so you can just go to the App Store and download Daily Dozen, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, and it will show you that you'd be eating 3 servings of legumes, 3 servings of beans or lentils a day. They're half a cup as a serving. You'd be eating 3 servings of whole grain. 2 of my servings are a cup of oatmeal, and then I might have rice or quinoa, half a cup on the side. So that's 3 servings of whole grain, 4 servings of fruit for the day, and 5 servings of vegetables. And I'm very full with a 1/4 cup of nuts.
Speaking on fiber, I get confused a lot when I'm reading labels. It'll often say soluble and insoluble fibers, and I'm not sure which I should be targeting.
You should do a little of both, because soluble, it hooks up with your cholesterol and wheelbarrows it right out of your bottom. So it lowers your cholesterol level. And insoluble is feeding, it's food for your microbiome, for the bacteria that you are populating in your large colon that are producing chemicals like that are anti-inflammatory, like butyrate, like serotonin. That's an anti-anxiety, antidepressant kind of hormone that your body makes. If you starve your microbiome by not having enough fiber, you don't produce those chemicals. So that's from the insoluble fiber. So you want a bit of both.
Okay, good to know.
So don't worry about it. If you're eating a whole plant food diet with a variety of different foods, Dr. Bolshevitz recommends eating 30 to 40 different plant types over the week. My wife and I do that about breakfast, brunch time. We eat about 30 different things, a touch of raisin, a touch of radish, a touch of garlic, a touch of, a couple handfuls of greens, some oats, some, some nuts and flax seeds. And, we eat a huge variety, but you could do that over a week period of time.
Okay.
Who's next here? Ken.
Seems like a good time to ask this. I know it, but I forgot it. And if I look on the internet, I'll find the answer. It's easy, but this fits into exactly what we're talking about. So fat. There's going to be polyunsaturated fat and monosaturated fat. And I forget the difference and which one we need the most of.
So Scott, do you want to deal with that?
Yeah, so like the fat that's in olives is primarily monounsaturated, and then so you want more unsaturated fat rather than saturated fat. So actually we'll talk about that a little bit next week's class, which I'll be doing nutritional myths and other popular diets. I'll be talking about carbohydrates, fat, protein. We'll kind of break it down there in a little more detail, but it's kind of like, so you want your fat to come from whole plant foods, not from processed oils, not from processed foods. So so all plants contain mostly unsaturated fat. So, but both monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So you don't really need to worry about how much of each of those you're getting necessarily. You just want to be not eating the saturated fat, which is primarily in animals, beef, pork, chicken, cheese, all the oils and things like that. That's where so when someone says try to cut down on saturated fat, we're really saying cut down on eating animals, because that's where most of the saturated fat is. So, but yeah, you're eating nuts and seeds and avocados and even olives and then all the other whole plant foods, you're going to be getting mostly all unsaturated fat, both poly and monounsaturated.
So the poly and mono may be related to like the fiber soluble and insoluble. You maybe want a little bit of both because they each do have benefits for your body, but you don't want to just stick with one or the other.
It's kind of interesting. I'm looking at the label of the flaxseed.
Yeah.
And they have, it's 4.5 total fat. Well, it doesn't have any saturated fat. That's good. And it has 3 poly and 1 mono. That sounds better because it sounds like mono's the heavier kind of oil, things that are oily like olives. Poly might be more like leafy greens. I'm just
Yeah,
digging.
you're probably, that's true. And just, I guess the take home is we don't have to worry about it. Nature takes care of it. So if we're eating a wide variety of whole plant foods, we're going to be getting all the right amounts of all the different kinds of fats that we need.
Okay. Thanks for the question. And Susan, maybe you didn't take your hand down. Maybe you have a question. It's under. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't lower my hand.
Oh, that's all right. It's common. All right. Who else has a question? And I'm going to go back to the gallery and see if I can see anybody who has any hands. Hard to believe we're almost 8 o'clock. Since we have probably a couple, maybe a few new members, I see new names here of people who haven't spoken up. Maybe we could have Lisa kind of tell us what's going on, and then she can get back to her studies or whatever she needs to do. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa. I'm a third-year osteopathic medical student at Western University in the California campus. So I've been working with Dr. Ross and Scott for a couple of years now, and I love coming to the classes, love meeting all of you and hearing your stories. So I've started to do health coaching one-on-one with anyone who's interested in wanting a little bit more individual help with whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be nutrition, could be exercise, could be mindfulness, sleep. And we also have a book club going. So we're having our 3rd meeting this week, actually, on Thursday. So you're welcome to join that as well. We're reading Salt, Sugar, and Fat by Michael Moss. And then I just started a book club with the students at the medical school. So we're having our first meeting tomorrow. We're reading The Craving Mind. I have both of these here because I need to finish reading them. So lots of exciting things. We have the Facebook group, and I'm just always available because it's a great learning opportunity for me too. So I already put my email in the chat, and then it's also in the newsletter, as Scott mentioned. So nice to meet all of you.
And we're lucky that Lisa has had an interest. She doesn't have her degree yet, so she's not charging. These are free services to anyone who is interested. And I must tell you, I've had a number of really good recommendations or feedback from people from the class who said that it was really helpful spending some time with Lisa.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
All right. Ken, your hand is up. Is that a new question, or did you just leave it up? And whoever else has something they want to offer or suggest, that's what this class is about today.
You're muted, Ken.
Still muted. I know it's hard to see that little red line go away, but you're still muted. And I can't unmute you. I don't think. I'm gonna say ask to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. I don't know what happened. My picture's not up there.
Okay.
Oh, it's down here, but anyway, I'm going to talk about protein, ask about protein later, but I've been waiting for it to come up.
Okay.
So while we're talking about fat, you know that the biggest concern I have is protein because of a hormone I take that I need to take, and it's saving my life. But the price of that hormone is muscle reduction. So I'm concerned about I'm concerned about protein, and I want to make sure I get plenty. And I've determined how much I'm going to get, and I'm not going to tell you. But I just have, there's a lot of things that are fairly reasonable calories and very high protein, and one is hemp seeds. Now, hemp seeds have some saturated fat. In fact, compared to most things I eat, they have quite a bit, 1.5 grams per serving. Most things I eat have none. So a little concerned about that, but I'll eat a serving of hemp seeds a day, and the main concern is that saturated fat is 1.5 grams once a day since I don't eat a lot of other saturated fat. This surely worth it, right? Since it's like 11% protein. No, it's 9%. That's still high protein for the amount of calories it has. What do you think about that saturated fat, 1.5 grams in hemp seeds?
I guess I would say I wouldn't be too concerned about that. If that's the only saturated fat you had in your diet, you're probably doing pretty well.
I don't have much.
No, that isn't very much.
Okay, I'll talk about protein if it comes up.
Okay. We'll see what other people have to say.
Thanks.
We'll be talking about protein next week too.
Yeah. So we're in a holding pattern here. No one's speaking up. We've been dealing with anxiety and depression and other kinds of things. And so I have a 6-minute video that I'm going to play for you, only just because I can. And if someone wants to stop me, now is your opportunity to unmute and say, I've got a question. Otherwise, we can watch this little video. It's called Anti-Inflammatory Diet for Depression. Depression and anxiety are really quite prevalent in our culture, particularly with the pandemic. And let's see what Dr. Greger has to say about it.
Depression affects more than 150 million people worldwide, making it a leading cause of losing healthy years of life as a result of disability. In fact, by 2020, depression may be the second leading cause of healthy years of life lost, second only to heart disease. Why is depression so common? Well, it is said nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. But why would we evolve to get depressed? Depression poses a baffling evolutionary puzzle, if it has such negative effects, but Yet it remains so common and heritable, meaning a big chunk of risk is passed through our genes. So there must be some kind of adaptive benefit. Otherwise, presumably, it would have been naturally selected against. Maybe depression is an evolutionary strategy for defense against infection. Infection has been the leading cause of mortality throughout human history. The average life expectancy was 25, and it was not uncommon for half our kids to die. With such stark capabilities, infection has been a critical and potent driving force in natural selection. When we become infected, there's a surge of inflammation as our body mounts a counterattack. And then what happens? We feel lousy. We feel sick, we get weak, tired, slow, and sleepy. We don't want to see anyone, we don't want to do anything. All we want to do is sleep. It's like we're depressed. And that's great for fighting infection. Not only does it help us conserve energy so we can put up a good fight, but reduces social contact. We're not running around infecting everyone. It's the same reason we evolved to think poop doesn't smell good or decaying flesh. That keeps us safe from infection. In fact, we see this phenomenon with other social animals like honeybees and mole rats, who feel impelled to crawl off and die alone when they get sick, which reduces the risk for the rest of the community. The relationship between mental health and inflammation was first noted in 1887, for which the only psychiatrist ever win the award got a Nobel Prize. But what evidence have we accumulated in the centuries since that inflammation causes depression? Well, people who are depressed have raised inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein. Inflammatory illnesses are associated with greater rates of major depression. Indeed, that's what's found in a variety of inflammatory conditions, including more kind of benign inflammatory conditions like asthma and allergies. And that's important, suggesting the mood symptoms are not simply feeling bad about having a terrible disease, but maybe directly tied to the inflammation. And most powerfully, you can actually induce depression by inducing inflammation. Like when we give interferon for certain cancers or chronic infections, up to 50% go on to suffer major depression. Even just giving a vaccine can cause enough inflammation to trigger depressive symptoms. Taken together, these studies are strongly suggestive of inflammation being a causative factor of mood symptoms. So, can an anti-inflammatory diet help prevent depression? We didn't know until about 43,000 women without depression were followed, along with their diets, for about a dozen years to see who became depressed. And it was those who ate a more inflammatory diet pattern, characterized by more soda, refined grains, and meat, suggesting that chronic inflammation may underlie the association between diet and depression. Normally, we think of omega-3s as anti-inflammatory, but they found fish to be pro-inflammatory, associated with increased C-reactive protein levels, consistent with recent findings that omega-3s don't seem to help with either depression or inflammation. The most anti-inflammatory diet is plant-based, which can cut C-reactive protein levels by 30% within 2 weeks, perhaps because of the anti-inflammatory properties of antioxidants. I've talked about this before, but never really explained why antioxidants are anti-inflammatory. See, oxidative damage caused by free radicals may cause an autoimmune response in the body by changing the chemical structure of otherwise ubiquitous molecules to generate new structures that the body attacks as foreign. For example, when LDL cholesterol gets oxidized, our body creates antibodies against it and attacks it. And so clinical depression can be accompanied by increased oxidative stress and the autoimmune inflammatory response it creates. Free radicals lead to autoimmune inflammation. Where else does inflammation come from in our diet? Endotoxins. Right? It's worth reviewing how the endotoxins in animal products can cause a burst of inflammation within hours of consumption. What does it do to our mood? If you inject endotoxin into people, within a few hours, inflammation shoots up, and so does feelings of depression, as well as feelings of social disconnection between people. Although previous research has demonstrated that inflammatory activity contributes to depressive symptoms, no work in humans has examined the effect of experimentally induced inflammation on anhedonia, the lack of reaction to pleasurable stimuli. This is an important symptom of depression. No work has been done, that is, until now. Within hours of endotoxin hitting their bloodstream, these experimental subjects not only started to feel depressed, but they had significant reductions in activity in the reward center of their brain. They were less excited about winning money playing video games, for example, in this study. But by eliminating animal products and eating antioxidant-rich diets, we may be able to prevent or treat depression.
So one of the reasons I played that for you is I hope that the majority of you are starting to understand how important inflammation is for our chronic illnesses. The chronic illnesses of our heart attacks, heart failure, underlying basis, inflammation. Pneumonia is an inflammatory condition, asthma, so heart and lung problems. Alzheimer's, dementia, that are noted to be now inflammation as an underlying cause. We go down system by system, and we find a common denominator. The inflammation that we are exposed to on a chronic basis is leading to the vast majority of our chronic illnesses. And you have the opportunity to reduce the amount of inflammation going on inside your body by choosing foods that are anti-inflammatory. So if you had this information before you ever took your first bite of food and learned to like it, what would you choose? Would you choose to eat foods that cause you to have inflammation, or foods that are anti-inflammatory? And if you have trouble staying on track, ask yourself that question. And Diane, you're up next.
Well, I was just going to say with Diane here, this is David. When it was well known in the hepatitis C clinic where I was working, in the good old days, we used interferon, which caused quite an inflammatory response and this huge cytokine storm that invariably led to a high incidence of depression in all these folks as a marker for treatment there.
Thanks for sharing that. You'll keep hearing more and more of this as time goes on. Inflammation is something that I was not immersed in for my first 40 years as a physician.
One of the interesting things too, Dr. Greger has some videos on, is basically if you think about on your complete blood count that you get on routine blood tests, there's a white blood cell count that we all get routinely, and people on the standard American diet have chronically elevated white blood cell counts, and a lot of times when people that go on a more whole food plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, they tend to lower their white blood cell count. It actually goes down around 2 or 3 or 4,000, which a lot of doctors, providers would be like panicking. Oh, what's going on? What's wrong with them? Why is their white blood cell count going down? And it's actually a good thing when it's low and it's on the low end of normal. But what's the key is if you get an infection, say you get pneumonia, or you get poked with a rusty nail or something and somehow get an infection in your body, and so it gets red and hot and swollen on your arm because you've got a little infection there, or from a bug bite or whatever it is, and your white blood cell count should spike. It should actually go up, because that's basically your body's immune system reacting to the infection. So acute inflammation in that situation is a good thing. So because you want to, amass all your white blood cells and your other immune factors to go and treat the infection. What we don't want is the chronic inflammation. And so that's another. He has some videos on that, how you can actually correlate mortality, so death from any cause, with so the higher your white blood cell count is on a chronic ongoing basis, the more chances you are gonna die from a chronic illness, from an illness. And so I've had many patients where I've actually had to tell the provider, oh my gosh, there's this patient that's on a plant-based diet, goes to your classes or whatever, and their white blood cell count keeps going down and down and down. And it's like, well, it's now going down into where what's normal, what's appropriate. Because lab values are based on what the average is. So if you guys have ever taken a statistics class, so you have the average, which is the median, and that's the average, say, white blood cell count. And then, every lab has their own reference range of values based on thousands and thousands of blood samples. And then you have 2 standard deviations below the median, 2 standard deviations above the median, and that's your reference range. That's what's considered normal. But when the whole entire population has chronic illness, chronic inflammation, then that is going to be shifted to the right. It's going to be shifted to higher white blood cell counts. And so when people are, they decrease their chronic inflammation, it starts to actually go down to where it really should be. So if everybody was on a whole food plant-based diet, getting good sleep, exercise, not smoking, then the white blood cell count lab reference range would be shifted back to the left, back to the lower, what's actually considered normal. So pretty interesting stuff. Instead of doing all these expensive tests on inflammatory markers and autoimmune disease markers and all these things, you could actually tell whether someone has chronic inflammation or not from something really cheap and simple like a white blood cell count. So interesting. But yeah, there's some videos on nutritionfacts.org that Dr. Greger talks about the studies and the data on that.
So I'm looking around the room to see if there's anybody who wants to raise their hand or has something else that they want to add, or another question that's come to mind. Okay, Diane.
Okay, it's Diane this time. And what about gluten? Gluten-free diets. Gluten's supposed to be inflammatory. Is that something that I have a friend who has MS and she's on gluten-free and she's just doing some alternative type of things. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on gluten and different, the inflammatory response that the body gives to gluten.
Sure, I can take that. So gluten is inflammatory for people that have celiac disease. So about 1% of the population has an allergy to gluten, which is called celiac disease. And in those patients, gluten does cause inflammation. So they need to avoid it because it's basically an allergy. There's estimation of up to maybe 3% of the population has some gluten sensitivity, which means it could be causing some inflammation. Maybe they should still consider avoiding it, but that's only, again, now 3% of the population. So that leaves us with 97% of the population should actually include gluten containing grains in their diet, because I have a reference to it. It's a paper that came out that was actually giving overall recommendations based on all the preponderance of the evidence when it comes to gluten-free diets. And problem is when people, they'll say, well, because gluten, the main gluten containing grains mainly are wheat, barley, and rye. There is some gluten in some of the other grains. I actually have a somewhere on the website where it shows which ones have gluten and which ones don't, but you can also look it up. Just looking it up online is fine. But the problem is when people think I think I'm gluten sensitive, I think I should avoid gluten. What ends up happening is they avoid all whole grains. And so they just kind of, I'm just not going to eat whole grains because they're inflammatory, because they think about gluten. And so that's actually going to do more harm than good, because you're actually missing out on really healthy food. Intact whole grains are really loaded with lots of nutrients and are anti-inflammatory and are all anti-inflammatory. So for 97% of the population, even gluten is anti-inflammatory, even gluten-containing grains. But for if you're in that 3% that has some gluten sensitivity, then it's pretty easy to find there's plenty of other whole grains that don't contain gluten if you just mainly avoid the wheat, barley, and rye for the most part. But so that's where the data falls on that.
So gluten is just it causes inflammatory response and a leaky gut to people with celiac disease. It doesn't cause any type of
Correct.
It's just local. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Or if you have some gluten sensitivity, so there is data on that. But so for sure, the 1% that has celiac, which is a diagnosis it has to be made by a biopsy on a colonoscopy, is the definitive diagnosis for that. There are some blood tests, but real definitive diagnosis for celiac is a biopsy on colonoscopy. But maybe up to 3% of the population has some gluten sensitivity, and so even in those people, you might consider avoiding gluten. And then there's also differences between the grains that we have in America versus like Europe. I know a lot of the wheat products in Europe have a different, they're gluten for whatever reason. So I know a lot of patients that are gluten sensitive here, but then they go travel to Europe and they don't have any trouble with the bread they eat in Europe because their gluten containing grains are somehow grown differently or processed differently or whatever. So there are some variations in that, and whether there's an effect with GMOs and things like that. There's some debate about that, but yeah, in general, I'd say if you're in the 97% that doesn't have gluten sensitivity or celiac, you should not be worried about gluten containing grains. They're actually anti-inflammatory.
Okay, thank you.
And since you have that interest, I want to take you to a site. If you haven't been there already, you can go there very quickly. It's nutritionfacts.org. Nutritionfacts.org. It's right here. And this is the site, and you can do a search and you type in gluten, and you can see right at the top the potential harm in unnecessary gluten-free diets, which may help clarify the issue. And it talks pros and cons of gluten and how to diagnose gluten intolerance. And there's a whole list of things that you have access to for you and your friend to
Okay, thanks
consider.
so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right.
That's one of the things that we love to do, is share resources with you so that you can kind of do this research on your own and say, who are these guys who are coming up with this stuff? I mean, really, we just read that it's a problem, and here they're telling us it's not a problem. And, this is how we got started in this. We were confused, and we have searched out resources that we have come to trust because they're not sites that are selling products for your health. They're doing this as a labor of love because of some family member that was saved or something that went on in their life, and they really have dedicated their lives to providing evidence-based science, not just hype. So
yeah, and since we were talking about the gluten thing, you probably remember the Wheat Belly and Grain Brain books that were out, and the studies that they did on that were the people with celiac disease. So they just kind of took the 1 to 3% that the study showed inflammatory response when they ate gluten, and they just generalized that to everybody. So they take a seed of truth. This happens a lot in diet books. So there's a few studies that show there's some inflammation or some problem with a particular food or a nutrient, and then so there's a seed of truth in it, but then they just generalize it, market products, and put out a whole bunch of information, and then it's kind of get you hooked, it's kind of the hook, line, and sinker, so to speak, because they're just trying to sell books. And whereas there's books like Dr. Greger has books too, but his you know, if you spend some time on his website, watch the videos, even on my website, I have on our Live Lifestyle Medicine website, there's a couple of, under the videos section, I have a couple of videos of how it's good to watch. Dr. Greger goes over how they come up with the videos and kind of the behind the scenes. He kind of pulls back the curtain and shows how they review the science and come up with the information. And I think it's really important to watch that, because that's where it's a lot different. And because, you know, his books, like How Not to Die book and How Not to Diet book, he's got like 30,000 references in there and whatnot. So it's not like it's not like a Dr. Greger diet. It's just, here's what's the preponderance of the science say about nutrition at this time, and he lays it out. So it's not like he's advocating for a specific, you know, just a specific type of a diet based on what he believes. It's like, well, here's the evidence that supports which eating patterns and which foods we should trend towards and moving in that direction. And here's why, and here's what the science shows. So there's a big difference in those philosophies.
Marcia.
Yeah, where can you go on the nutritional facts to find out about thyroid?
You do the same thing I just did. You
Okay.
go there to the page and you go to the search box at the top and you type in thyroid.
Okay, that's what I told my sons, to go to nutrition facts, or maybe I said food revolution. I don't remember, but okay.
Yeah. Go to nutritionfacts.org
Alrighty,
and type in thyroid.
alrighty.
Okay. All right, we're getting close to 8:30. We have time for a question or two, one or two, and we'll see what happens. If there's anybody else who has anything that they'd like to talk about, I guess, Scott, you could tell us about next week for a bit while they're thinking about it.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about nutritional myths and other popular diets. I feel like it's a really important class because it gives we go over some basics of nutrition, about the macronutrients, the micronutrients. So, you know, your carbohydrates, fat, and protein. And we talk a bit about the difference between reductionism and holism, which is, you know, where we've kind of gone off track when it comes to nutrition science, as we focus too much on the minutia and not on the forest through the trees. We got to focus more on it's more about the food than on the nutrients. And so we'll talk a bit about that, and then I'll go over a few of the popular diets, you know, like keto and different things like that, give you some tidbits on that. And it's just a good way to, you know, kind of a lesson in understanding what's important about nutrition. I think that's what hopefully you'll come away with next week. And so it's a more formal presentation. So I have a PowerPoint, and so hope you guys can attend that, and you just still have some time for questions at the end.
We loved all the questions tonight from all of you. Thank you for participating and for supporting new members. And, you know, it's become a family of people who are have attended a lot of these meetings together with us. So we're grateful.
If any of our new people are still here, let me go to back to the website here, and then also have the Eugene Plant-Based Providers website. So if you go to eugeneplantbasedproviders.com website, we have the upcoming events. If you click on upcoming events, it's also the link to this is also in the class newsletter that comes out every Sunday. You can sign up for, but hopefully you guys can make it. We're having our next movie date, movie social on Saturday, April 15th at the Springfield First Christian Church, same place we had it back in February. We're going to watch a different movie. The Marshall Plan is the next one, which is really interesting. It's about the town of Marshall, Texas, that did a plant-based immersion, and some of the health benefits people experience, and it's real inspiring. So hope you guys can come, and we'll be serving just like last time, serving lots of plant-based snacks, and you don't have to bring anything, just bring yourself, friends, family. And I'd ask for you to sign up if you're going to come. So we have a head count of how many. We had 37 last time, and already got 25 signed up so far for this one, and we're still a few weeks out for that. So should be pretty full. Hope you guys can come.
Yeah, come. I'll be coming. Dave and Cherie.
Hi. I just wanted to say, I watched a movie. It was Forks Over Knives Extended Interviews, where they had interviews with people that were in the movie, and it was a whole bunch of segments of things, and it was really easy to watch because I'd watch a little bit doing the dishes and then come back the next day and watch a little more. So I don't know. I didn't know that existed. I stumbled across it on Tubi, I think.
Yeah, it's great. I've seen that too years ago.
Lots of good resources. They're getting to be more and more. So we're thrilled about that also. Anyway, it's been fun spending time with you all, and we look forward to seeing you next week. We hope you have a good week. Scott, thank you a bunch, and Lisa, and all the other members who participated.
Charlie, I have another question for you.
Okay, Marcia.
Your soy Bella milk maker, is your scoop very big, or is it about that high? Your measuring cup?
The measuring cup for the soy milk is about, it's about, it's a little cup. I think it's an ounce, something like that. It's not a lot, but it's enough. But it's enough to make the soy milk. Just dump the soybeans in that amount and then dump it into the metal container and soak them.
Oh, so you can soak them in there. Okay.
Yeah, you take the metal container and you put it inside the plastic container, and you fill the plastic container almost to the top and let it sit in there for about 4 or 5 hours. It'll soak, and then they'll be soft enough that when it grinds it'll grind out more of the soy.
I think mine stays in there. I'll have to check now.
All right. Well, if you have problems, send me a note.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, everybody.
Thank
Till
you.
the next
Good night.
time.
Good night. Have a good
Good
week.
night.
You too.
Thanks.
Mine stays